Hotep, I'm Dr. Gloria Lattimore Peace, host and producer of OmniU Presents the H3O Art of Life show. The title of this show is Popular Culture, Hip Hop. This is a subject about which I know so little that I am very, very happy that I am joined by guests who know a lot, and I'm sure that you will learn a lot more and get a perspective on popular culture, hip hop, from viewing this show. If you have some young people around, tell them to come watch this. I want to introduce my guest, Dr. Lance Webb Kepra, who is Associate Director of the Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies at Northeastern Illinois University. And I want to introduce Booda, who is an artist, an activist, and a loctician. And these will be the people who will bring forth the answers to questions like, what is hip-hop and who are the hip-hop people? So I'll just begin with Dr. Webb, and then you will join in Booda as you see fit, and we will just go on from there. There you are. So what is hip-hop?
Well, hip-hop is many different things. I think from an academic perspective, hip-hop is often defined as a musical genre that consists of four essential elements: the art of the DJ combined with the art of the MC, the art of graffiti, and last but not least, the art of the breakdancer. These four elements kind of converge to form an artistic expression of hip-hop. There are other pillars that go along with that, but those are essentially the base elements of this musical expression.
Okay, where does the spoken word fit into that?
The art of the MC, the master of ceremony.
The MC is the one who brings that element in.
That's right.
All right. So what's your read on this, Booda?
Well, me as an MC,
all right,
the aspect in which I became in tune with hip-hop was as a source for me to express myself, a source for me to utilize my imagination, you know, and in conjunction with my reality that I came up in, and express that in a way that's non-destructive. And you know, it's a huge release. It's me as a practitioner. It's therapeutic and ceremonial, you know.
all right. So now that we've gotten a little definition going here, let's find out how you came into contact with the hip hop.
Well, as a little older than my brother here, you know, I go back to hip hop from its commercial kind of origin, 79, 80, when you had groups like Sugar Hill Gang doing their thing. I was exposed to it as maybe a junior, senior in high school. I didn't initially, the first expressions of hip hop, which it was not referred to as hip hop then, it was referred, at least to us, we heard it as rap music. Mm-hmm. And to me, it really didn't catch my attention initially because I'm a 60s baby, and so I was accustomed to listening to music, even in R&B, that had a message to it that talked about our social and political conditions. Now, mind you, that type of hip hop existed in the late 70s, mid to late 70s, but on the radio, you didn't hear it. You would hear more of a popish, commercial form of rap music. So that was my introduction. I kind of dismissed it for the next 5 or 6 years, and it wasn't until I became a young professional after college working with young people, there became a popular movement commercially called, we would call it the golden age of hip hop at this time, but it was a more conscious form of hip hop. It was more political and social, groups like Public Enemy, KRS-One. And when I heard that music, it really turned me on, and I said, man, this is powerful. But some young people that I work with that I actually taught in high school introduced me to it. So that was my first real introduction to real hip hop, I would say.
All right. How about you?
What the brother just spoke on is, in fact, it insinuates the different aspects of hip hop. He mentioned the commercial aspect that he was exposed to first was offered as rap, titled rap, and rap is the actual physical, technical aspect of hip hop. Hip hop is the culture. Hip hop is the life that the generations that express it live. You know what I mean? And you can be a rapper and not be expressing hip hop. You know, those are two separate things. The more cultural, the more real life relation and music that has the message in it, that's hip hop, because it's a moving force. You know, it's an inspiring force. It's a progressive force. However, the music that we have, a lot of music that we have now, a lot of the radio, commercial, profit-driven type of bubblegum music that we have now, that's rap music. That's a physical expression, the actual rapping, words to a rhythm, or a spoken word to a rhythm. You know, it's totally separate from the actual culture and entity that hip hop is. It's only an aspect of it.
I remember Arrested Development. I remember Arrested Development mostly because I liked it, and also because one of my former students was an elder. He was a real elder, and they incorporated him into the group, and that was just so hip, you know, to see him be a part of that, because that was some really conscious lyrics and it was some conscious music, and it attracted my attention. I remember an album called Fear of a Black Planet. Who was that?
Public Enemy.
Public Enemy. I remember Queen Latifah, who used to come out with some very good music during a period in which I was interested in hearing what the young people had to say. How did we get to the point at which we got something called gangsta rap? What was the road to gangsta?
Well,
You want me to take the floor on that one, brother?
we could both speak on that.
Okay.
You can go first.
Gangsta rap is relevant. It has a relevancy to it, because once again, these are the harsh realities of the generations that express this culture called hip hop. The good and the bad, the pretty, the fun, party, and love, as well as the pain, death, destruction, and mayhem that we live in some of our communities. There's a certain thing about it that in which it becomes destructive when that's the only aspect that's being projected. You know, right now we have a terrible condition of malnutrition with the distribution of the different aspects of hip hop. Gangster rap is relevant because it's an aspect of reality that we express. However, there are many other aspects of reality that we express as well that don't get the same, exposure as the gangster club rap. You know, Arrested Development, they can't get the extra sweet distribution deal like Lil Jon can.
What about Dead Presidents? Are they still around, Dead Prez?
Yeah, they are.
Do they get the distribution?
They, brothers that's bringing those progressive messages and those cultural messages and those mobilizing messages, they don't get the same receptance from the industry as the brother that's making the circus music. You know what I mean? And that 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 gives recognition to the fact that the people that's running these companies, you know, they know very well who they give their deals to, who they give their distribution to. They know very well who they decide to put in the forefront, or what aspect of hip hop they decide to put in the forefront and force feed the youth.
Yeah, I would just, you know, I think the brother's right on point. And I would add that, you know, when you look at these major record companies and corporations like the Vivendis, Universal Music Group, Bertelsmann, Sony's, that because of their massive concentration of ownership of media companies, they are in fact what we know today as culture producing industries. They literally produce culture. And as African people, we understand that we have always been in a very precarious position as it relates to our image. I think Baba Jake used to talk about the dehumanization of African people. So when we think about that from a cultural perspective, these culture producing industries who are producing this music, interestingly enough, for white youth, because the major purchasers of hip hop and rap music are essentially suburban white males who now have this perspective of black youth in general, or youth of color, as dehumanized, animalistic, over-sexualized. This fits into that continued dehumanization of African people. So, as Brother Booda mentioned, this is not a coincidence. This is by design. It's an attempt to continue the projection of white supremacy, and you don't have to say white people are supreme. All you have to do is show black people as inferior. And I think that's what we're getting in the music. And it's almost a natural response of the dominant culture to see us in a dehumanized way. They feel comfortable. It makes them feel better about themselves seeing us like this. Mm-hmm. And so, unfortunately, too many of our artists will not maintain their integrity, or through ignorance, as Brother Booda mentioned. I mean, he, as an artist, he can make a decision on whether he wants to sell or he wants to maintain the integrity of himself and his community and his ancestors. And a lot of our artists who want to maintain that integrity, they get marginalized in the industry. Those who say, well, hey, look, it's about making money. Although they're really not making that much money, even the most highly paid artists don't make a lot of money when you compare the amount of money they generate to what the industry actually makes. Mm-hmm. You know, so if Jay-Z makes $30 million in 1 year, the record company made $1 billion, yeah. Right? So, yeah, it's, you know, I think, you know, the whole idea of gangster rap was a studio manufactured perspective, as Booda said, no diversity. What they did was they took that one little aspect of what was expressed in hip hop, dealing with the street life, dealing with, you know, the violence that exists in our community. They just took that piece and they magnified it, and then they alienated everything else, and then they fed that to the world. And it's not really for our kids, it's really for their kids.
Mm-hmm. You know, I'm thinking about, I had Oscar Brown Jr., the late Oscar Brown Jr. on my show. Yes. And I asked this question, and I wasn't satisfied with his answer, because I think as an artist, pretty much artists do believe in poetic license. They believe that art should not be stifled, it should not be handicapped, it should not be roped in or in any way encumbered by you know, what people think about what the artist is expressing. But as a woman, as a sister in a community, I have a great concern about the misogyny that I hear in the lyrics, you know, because these are your mothers, your sisters, your aunts, your female cousins, and so forth, that you are denigrating for, you know, for filthy lucre. You know, this, I mean, how much money does it take to sell your mother out? You know, what kind of man does that reduce you from, to, you know, to play the dozens on your own mother, you know? And so I have a great concern for something being called a culture. The African woman is an icon in African culture. You simply do not disrespect and dishonor the mother of the race. So how do you get to the place at which you can disregard things that ought to be set aside? I mean, this just ought to be, no, that's untouchable. We don't go there. But, you know, what am I looking at when I'm looking at bitches and hoes and all these things that are, you know, a part of the lyrics of some of the music?
Yeah, that whole idea of misogyny and the disrespect of women in forms of rap music that we see is not something that was indigenous to original hip hop. You go back and you do content analysis of what we may call old school hip hop. You don't see and you don't hear any of that in the music and in the expression. That doesn't come until later when we see this expression of gangster rap. You know, my particular perspective of that is that, and it appears that it's coming from young black males today, when in actuality it's coming from some artists that are trying to make money, and they have realized that the industry is intrigued with this dehumanization of women, particularly black women. And so some artists have decided that they feel like they can make money doing this. But if you look at what's going on in the community is in opposition to that ideology. I always use the statistic with young people as it relates to homicides, and that is that 60% of young black males between the ages of 15 and 24 who are incarcerated for homicide are there for killing a man who was abusing their mama. So that shows you from a real perspective, we don't tolerate disrespect of our mothers and women. The quickest way to have violence done to you in the black community as a young black male is to violate a guy's or a young brother's female loved one. We don't tolerate that. But when you listen to the music that appears to come from us, it looks like that we endorse it. And so I always have to tell people, you have to be very careful not to impose what you hear in the industry to the community, because they have nothing to do with each other.
Very good. I like that answer better than I like the fact that Oscar Brown just kind of didn't commit to an answer. What's your feeling?
I agree. You know, this is a case of an art form that we developed being used against us.
Yes.
So a lot of these brothers that's in the forefront with the, you know, with the rap music, you know, through being brought across in a you know, being exalted, you know, being promoted, so, you know, they become influential, you know, forces, you know, in the community. You know what I mean? To some. You know, we're under attack under so many fronts. You know, us losing more and more of our historical and traditional customs. You know what I mean? That you know, that we enforce throughout the community. They using these, like the brother said, they using these far in between. You know, it's not a lot of these guys. It's not a lot of these you know, extra big rappers. It's not a lot of these guys, but they have a certain influence on, you know, their fan base that makes it look like that perspective of the, you know, disrespect of the mother and the sister as a mainstream, you know, perspective in our community, when in fact, you know, I don't agree that that's the actual perspective of the community either. You know, it's these things are illusions. You know what I mean? And it make it look like the people have this perspective, whereas these are a couple of rich, you know, or you know, trying to get rich rappers that's being brought across in a perspective that they speaking for the whole, and they not.
That's right.
You know, it's so sad when you think about wealth, you know, when you think about real wealth, as African people, we come from a continent where real wealth exists, where diamonds and gold and oil and all of the natural resources on this planet exist in abundance.
Yes.
And how you can get caught up in trinkets, how you can get caught up in worthless things, thinking that you are in some way rich when we are being deprived of a continent that is filled with all of the good things of life. And here we are over here scratching for the quote almighty dollar, and we're happier to have a gold chain than we are to have a gold mine. You know, it's ridiculous for us to pimp our gifts, because music is a gift. If you talked for 2 seconds to Kalan Phil Koran, he would tell you that the first human beings began life musically. We sang instead of talked. So that music is a gift from the divine. It was something that was given to us. It is so precious. And now our precious gift is being turned on us, as you pointing out. Our own culture is being used against us.
Exactly.
And we are supporting
Exactly.
that. We're supporting that. You know, why is it that we support those things that destroy us
Dr.
or that
Peace,
harm us?
I think that points to the fact that, you know, it always goes back to, you know, what our people have been through, the type of dehumanization, the type of the mental holocaust, the culture holocaust that we've been through. There was never a movement that corrected that. It was never a movement that gave us that we were able to retrieve what we lost. And sometimes we expect for us to be able to recover from the atrocities that we've been through psychologically and physically, economically, socially. We just can't recover from that without there being a moving force to replenish what was lost.
But we have to.
We have to.
We have to do it anyway. You know, I understand what you're saying, and I agree. There has never been a healing. And furthermore, I never speak of this in past tense. I don't say it is what we have suffered. I always say it is what we are suffering. We continue to be under siege. We continue to be under surveillance. And so this is not going to end because we are dislocated. We are displaced, and we do not have the access to the resources, all of the resources that would be available to us if we were a sovereign people on our own land. But we have to anyway.
Yes, and hip hop is, you know, that was the birth of hip hop. That was the birth of any music that we created as a people. That was the intent. That was the purpose of that creation.
Absolutely. And then, yeah, I just want to, and right on that point, absolutely, that hip hop is just a continuation of liberation music for African people, just a modern form of it in an urban context, right? So hip hop is a continuation of the spoken word, a continuation of the oral tradition, a continuation of jazz, you know, R&B, Negro spirituals, right? When that music was used and song was used to liberate us, right? That was the initial intent of hip hop, to keep it real, as Booda said earlier. It's about expressing reality of the hood, you know, and it's a diverse reality. It's about being true to, you know, who you are and where you come from and your people. And those who seek to continue our oppression recognize that music has traditionally been used to heal us and liberate us. So as soon as they saw that happening, they got busy using the music not to strip us and take it away, because then there would be an uproar and outcry, to take it change some of its elements so that the same music that was used to liberate us can be used now to oppress us. And so a lot of people can't see it because they don't really understand the intricacies of the elements of hip hop. When you talk about the pillars of, like I said, keeping it real, about being true to where you come from, about the concept of the battle, but not a battle of gangbangers, but the battle to see who is the best MC, the best breakdancer. So what those who sought to oppress us did was they left a shell of hip hop, but they changed the battle as an original pillar of hip hop from a battle between the MCs to see who's as nice as MC or the best DJ to the battle between the Bloods and the Crips. So the battle was still there, but now it's a battle among us in a violent way, keeping it real. They said, okay, you could keep it real, but we're gonna define what your reality is. And so your reality now is not the diversity that Booda mentioned earlier of fun, laughter, love, and the hood and violence, but just the violence and the pathology. That's your only reality now. Being true to yourself and where you come from, yeah, you want to be true to yourself, but not to the degree that you get stuck. And now all of a sudden you making millions of dollars and you still talking about, I'm still on the block, you know, or I'm still in the projects. No, that wasn't our reality. Our thing was be proud that you come, you know, you from the projects, be proud of that, but then move on and build on that. And so they have been very strategic in how they have not destroyed the music, but tweaked it,
repackaged,
and given it back to us in a way that we haven't understood what it actually means, and that is our continued oppression.
Part of the problem that we have, though, in keeping it real is study.
Yes.
You cannot keep it real if all you know is what you see before you, the experience that you are having. There were experiences before you got here. When you showed up on the scene, there was a long history before you got here. You want to find out why you have the hatred, the hate crimes directed toward women and toward children, then you've got to look at the captive trade, not the slave trade, but the Atlantic captive trade, when our children were being kidnapped from us and our villages were being sacked and burned and we were being transported away from home to all sorts of places so that we could be transformed from captives into slaves. You have to know where this stuff is coming from. You can't just sing to me about your daddy hit your mama. You gotta find out, when did men of African descent start hitting women of African descent? And obviously it's a loss of identity, and you got to probe that. So you got to study. You can't just get up and sing because you have the gift that you can make music. You have got to tell the truth. You can't just keep it real on some peripheral level, you know, on some very low level. There's all kind of levels of real.
That's right.
And you got to go deep to be real. Otherwise, you on some superficial level where your reality is so transparent until almost to be invisible.
And that's what we see a lot of now. We see a lot of, you know, it's this, you can take a hip hop class now. It's been trivialized to where you got a lot of people just, you know, mimicking what they see on TV. You know what I mean? And not really realizing that the easiest thing to do is to be honest and be yourself. You know what I mean? And that's what, you know, so they missing it right from the jump of what this culture is. And you know, I feel as if, you know, we as the people, we need to remember that the power is with the people. You know, we choose on what we support. We choose on, you know, who are the influences of our children. We get to choose that. That power lies with us. You know, how we get to that realization on a large scale, you know, is one thing. However, that power truly lies with us, the people. And we need to stop, you know, aligning ourselves with this new philosophy that we've adopted, as far as how to express our lives and how to and what to pass on to our children,
and how decadent you can be, how much of what other people produce you can consume. How hip is that? You don't manufacture anything, you don't make anything, but you buy everything in abundance. You have fleets of automobiles, you have stacks of everything that other people make. You don't make anything, and if they decide tomorrow to stop distributing you or stop letting you make music, then you out of business and you somewhere on the street, a homeless person.
Yeah.
So, a consumer culture, what kind of culture is that?
Yes.
When you generate nothing of your own. I used to look at the fact that I saw people who were dealing drugs and other kinds of things and apparently handling large sums of money, but in your own community, where could you spend it? You didn't have a decent place to dine. You didn't have decent schools for your children to attend. You didn't have anything that could change the quality of your life from bad to a little better, but you had all this money and you had this reputation, but you really had nothing of value. So it's ridiculous when you think about the fact that we're selling our birthright for a mess of pottage, that at the end of the day, we have so little to show for the great sacrifice that has been made down through centuries so that we could be here still making music.
Exactly.
So what you gonna do? What are we to do?
Well, we support. We should support good music. We should support anything that's can be used as a progressive force for our best benefit. You know what I mean? And that's why there's such a campaign on to minimize and subdue and muffle, the voice of the real, the voice of the brothers that's doing real work. You know what I mean? There's a campaign to keep those brothers local. You know what I mean? We can't stop them. Keep them local. Keep them small. You know what I mean? And there's a dual reality, because there is a lot of support. There is a lot of love. When I'm out doing what I do, I get a lot of support. I get a lot of love. However, I don't quite get that same support and that same love, that, young Dro get. You know what I mean? I don't get that same receptance, you know what I mean? And that's the problem. That's the problem. The problem is a diseased perspective, a diseased philosophy that we've, become accustomed to in this country. You know what I mean? And that's why groups like Arrested Development and Public Enemy, they were able to break ground, even amongst people fighting against them and trying to stop what they was doing, because the truth that they was bringing was so real that you couldn't deny it. You couldn't deny it. Nothing can move people. Nothing can contact or connect to the soul more than truth. And that's what a lot of, that's what the consumer, culture, doesn't really see anymore.
Does it perpetuate our condition as oppressed people? Is that part of what does that? Because it seems to me that we have another generation or generation after generation, you know, coming to the same place in life where we are content with consuming trinkets in this society and never thinking about things like land, which is the basis of culture. I have a lot of problems with people calling something a culture when it doesn't, when it has no land underneath, no foundation under it, and when there's not even an orientation toward that. You know, you're not even seeking to have any. You know, you're just gonna be is what Thomas Todd called hydroponic Negroes. Negroes just grow out of water. No land underneath. In order to have a culture, you have to have land.
Yes.
You cannot otherwise have a culture. So what you have now is a lifestyle. It's just a way of behaving and being in the world, which is not enough. And so consequently, if you're not talking about where you're going to have some land, where you're going to sink some roots down, where you're going to build your nation, how you're going to raise your children, how you're going to educate your children. If you're just talking about getting paid so you can consume something that's being made now in foreign countries, every time you turn something over, you see a tag on it, made in China. You know, it's not even U.S. made. So if that's all you can do, is that all we can hope for as far into the future as you can see? Is that that is our objective, is simply to get paid one way or the other and to buy things and to maintain the condition in which we are hemorrhaging children to the prisons, we are hemorrhaging women to living lives alone, trying to raise the children that are left from the fact that too many of our men are on drugs in prison or in the cemetery. You know, do we expect to have a future?
Well, I think those who seek our continued oppression don't plan for us to have a future, or their plan for our future is our continued oppression so that they can continue to exploit us. I think what our goal should be, and I think hip-hop has attempted to contribute to our liberation by talking about the things that you have mentioned. You know, Public Enemy called for, and he talked about a nation of millions, you know. So hip-hop in its original forms educated youth about the importance of land and culture and freedom. I mean, that's what wise intelligence and poor righteous teachers were educating the young people to do. What we have to understand clearly is that this is a battle, this is a war, and that as Booda mentioned, this war, our enemies are using our culture, our cultural attempts of liberation against us. And the good thing about it, it's really a good time in popular culture and in hip hop in particular, because I think people have gotten to the point where they have, you know, completely fed up with what they have seen and what they have heard in the music, and they're demanding that we get back to the source. So you know, there's no money left in the music industry. They have raped this thing. You, as artists, it's very difficult to make money, to get deals. They're doing 360 deals now, which means that a 360 deal is where you enter into a contract with a record label, and anything that you put your hands on, it generates money. Whether you get a film deal, whether you get a gym shoot contract, whether you get a speaking engagement, they get royalties. They get profit from whatever you do. It used to be they got paid from the records you sold, but because because of technology and downloads, music just doesn't make money anymore. So what they have to do is they have to, you know, take a few artists and try to parlay them into other avenues, but then they get proceeds. So there's not a lot of money left, which means now that they don't have anything to pay our people off with to get people to sell themselves out. And so it's an opportunity now for artists to be able to reflect themselves. And I think it's important for us to show those who have the information. I'm not one of them, but we have people who are experts in starting their own, starting businesses, doing marketing and promotion and distribution. You don't even need record companies anymore to get your music out there. With the internet, websites, you know, you could put and then make a decent amount of money and keep it in your pocket, keep it in the community. And when we keep it in the community, the music is much healthier for us. It's the industry that has made this a toxic form of music that is working to our demise.
Business.
Yeah.
Do for self.
Yes.
Yeah.
Marcus Garvey.
Yeah.
And that has been a transition that the music business has taken. It's so wide open now that you can be a self-contained, you know, business in your living room with at your computer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You know, it's real easy to sell your own music online now. You know, you don't now record labels are you know, they're becoming more aggressive at approaching artists. You know, if they see a certain artist in St. Louis or a certain artist in Atlanta, you know, has a certain sound scan number. The sound scan is your musical sales from a barcode that you acquire. You know what I mean? And so they look at sound scan numbers and they see who are these independent cats selling across, you know, in wherever they pinpointing in the country. And they look at these sound scan numbers and them being a groveling, greed, you know, people that they are, they you know, they now chasing the artist down, you know, because it's a lot of, you know, a lot of artists are becoming aware of how self-contained their business can be now, you know, due to the internet and due to technology.
But there has to be an objective.
However,
you know, making money not for making money's sake. There has to be an objective. When you know, hip hop to what? You know, hip hop to hip hop? No. There's a reason why you want revenue. There's a reason why you need resources. It's not just you. It's your family. It's your community. It's the next generation. The generation after that. When I think about the kinds of messages that could be brought out, for example, the lifestyle of, you know, this decadence, this exaggeration, you know, chasing women, you know, drinking hard alcohol, using drugs and all, sending yourself out of here long before your time. You know, what about hip hop to health? What about your diet? You know, what about the things you put into your body that give you energy and extend your life so that you can continue to do whatever you consider to be your purpose on this earth? But just to be living so-called high on the hog and participating in everything toxic, everything poisonous you can find, you putting it into your body, and you therefore setting the example for young people, because if that's the way you cool, you know, if that's the way you hip, then of course I should be doing that too, because I want to be cool and I want to be hip and I want to be like you. So I'm just thinking about if you're going to have a culture, have something to do with how children are getting raised, what families are consuming, how people are taking care of themselves, how are you able to do for yourself when there's no one to turn to accept yourself. You know, when is that message coming out?
Those very things those very principles and concepts are exactly what hip hop is.
That's right.
You know, for the first thing that we have to realize in addressing this issue is we have to define. We have to get our definitions to where they're widely understood. You know, and it's because rap music is also used to cause generational gaps. You know what I mean?
And
need,
give misinformation, intentional misinformation.
We need, you know, there needs to be a general understanding that, you know, hip hop are those principles.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And those principles, you know, you still got MCs out here that still that's their music. That's
right.
what they talk about in their music. However, that's not the brother that's getting the huge record deal.
Right.
He's underground.
Yeah.
You gotta know where to find him.
That's right.
You gotta know what store to go to that got his CD. You gotta know what internet radio station is playing stuff like what he do. You know what I mean? The stuff that's being force fed to us, like those ducks for that foie gras. What's that? That liver.
Foie gras.
You know, that stuff. That's rap music.
Okay.
You know, that's brothers rapping.
Yeah, that the mass
You know what I
media uses to dumb down our people intentionally. And as brother mentioned, you know, all of those things that you mentioned, land, family, health, there's brothers and sisters out here that have taken that in the oral tradition of hip hop to the highest most levels. You must learn teaching. You got some MCs that have done the whole history of African people from Kemet to now in one rap, one song, and powerful. I'm talking about, and you know, we come from a tradition out of the Academy of the Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies of ancient Kemetic thought and African history, classical. I mean, I've heard rappers, brothers and sisters that lay that whole piece out in one song and hit every point. So it's there, but you ain't never gonna hear it on GCI.
You're not gonna see it on,
and they gonna shut that thing down.
Yes.
And all they gonna do is feed us the stanky leg.
Yes.
You know, that's what they giving us.
Yes.
Well,
dumb
how
us
do
down.
we access it? How do we promote it? How do we make people aware that it exists, that are not in position to contact it naturally, like myself, for example?
I think the fact that, you know, we're having this sit down conversation, you know, is reflective of how we achieve that. You know, the more the brothers and sisters are able to let each other know what they got going on. You know what I mean? That's how it spreads. So that you know, that allows for people to support each other then. You know what I mean? Because at first we have to know what that brother over there is doing, or, well, where are these people? Like you said, who are these hip hop people? You know what I mean? And the fact that you know, the fact that I was fortunate enough to meet you, Dr. P.
Well, that was just, you know, that was design. That was
Exactly.
that was by design. You know, I walk into your shop, you play some music. I say, hey, come on, we got to talk about this. You know.
So
I've been looking for you.
It set up an environment for there to be dialogue now. You know what I mean? Because the brothers and sisters that's doing this real hip hop, you know what I mean, and promoting these healthy principles and these cultural traditions, you know what I mean, that we've always had. We need for our elders, you know, who fought before us and laid the way for us. You know, we need to have that understanding with our grandmothers and our aunties and our mothers and our uncles and our grandfathers. The fact that this over here, this stuff over here, this ain't us. That came from the industry. That ain't us. This right here is us. You know what I mean? So that our elders know now. You know, the fight that we in.
That's a powerful piece. Yeah, that's a powerful piece.
So our elders know that the fight that we in, because there's a, you know, there's been this thing to where it's been separated. To the elders don't understand what we're doing.
Right. Absolutely not.
That's right.
You know,
that's right. That's right.
And once again, that's expression of one of the ways on how this rap music is being used against us to create that type of gap in understanding.
Yes.
You know, from generation to generation.
That's right.
So now, you know, for the younger generation, that creates levels of resentment. You know what I mean? And for a lot of the elders, you know, they fear they fear they grandsons, and they fear their granddaughters. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's-
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Right.
And we need to close that generation gap
Right.
Yeah.
for us to
Right.
effectively.
And we need to open up the dialogue so that the deaf ear isn't turned, you know, because they don't want to hear nothing. They don't want to hear anything at all. I know that I was saved from going down that road by Tupac when he did Dear Mama. I love that song so well. I had somebody put it on a CD and make every song, no, first I had them put it on a tape. And both sides of the tape was that song over and over again. I just drive in my car with that tape playing and switch over to the other side, the same thing. And I fully, you know, I was fully redeemed by the fact that he, you know, he expressed that toward his mother. You know, my plan is to show you that I understand. And I wanted to write a response to that and tell him my plan is to show you I understand. Because I began to see, you know, that there was still, you know, we still had not lost our children lock, stock, and barrel, that there was still something there. But we are still, slavery is a process.
Yes, it
It's
is.
not an event. It isn't something that happened between this year and that year. It's a process by which you reduce people to the lowest common denominator, as you have said, for the purpose of continued exploitation. So it is still going on.
Exactly.
And consequently, we are losing members of our own community all the time to the various tactics. They're not coming through the music, they're coming through the institutions. They come through the church, they come through the school, they come through the marketplace, they come through everything that is organized in this society, because all of the institutions in any society have one main goal, and that's to preserve the status quo.
Exactly.
If an institution ever got out of line, if an institution ever undermined the status quo, it would not last. It would simply be destroyed. So we understand we cannot turn to the social institutions of this society for our liberation or our freedom. We've got, that's why I said we have to do it. You said we, you know, we've suffered and we've struggled and we've had all this happen, we haven't healed, but we have to do it anyway because we have nothing ahead of ourselves. If we don't say, you know, be free or die, if we don't say, have that kind of goal, then the only thing we can do is suffer until the end of our lives, and then our children will suffer until the end of theirs and their children, and so forth, so on. So we're not powerless.
That's right.
We will find a way. As old folks used to say, you have to make a way out of no way. We don't know what the way is, but where there's a will, there's a way. So we have to have the will. And we have to hear it in the music.
Yes.
So that's why we're here, to let, you know, our brothers and sisters, you know, all across the world know where our strength lies now. You know what I mean? That's why it's coined underground. You know what I mean? It's the underground, and we're looking for our progress, and we're looking for our mobilization, and we're looking for our leadership still on the surface. You know, our strength lies underground now. We just don't know that that's where it is anymore. We don't know where our, they killed off, you know, any brother or sister who dared to speak the truth on the surface. You know what I mean? So, you know, we have a lot of brothers, you know, such as Lance, such as Dr. Ray Hagan, such as Ashra Kwesi, underground, still putting in the work, the same work that Brother Malcolm did, the same work that Brother, you know, Martin did, the same brother that, you know, the same work Brother Medgar did. You know, they just, you know, the general public don't know about these brothers and sisters.
I'll give you the last word. Professor?
Well, you know, first I just want to say it was an honor and a pleasure to be here with you and
Pleasure
my
to
brother
have
Booda.
you.
You know, just to and I agree. You know, this is a continuation of our struggle and towards liberation. I feel good. You know, I talk to a lot of young people, 500, 600 at one time in our schools, and they are aware. This discussion that we're having. Any one of them could sit here with us and engage in this conversation. So they know it's just, you know, things work in divine order. And I think a time is coming soon when the underground will, you know, be that cornerstone that rises above ground. And I think people are underestimating where our young people are and what their capacity is. And I feel pretty good. I think things are going to, you know, they're looking up for us.
It's only natural law.
Yeah.
Nothing, all seasons change.
That's right.
You know.
That's a promise.
That's a promise.
Okay. Well, I look to you men to do your share, and certainly the sisters have to do ours, because we got the babies. So we have to put in our share of time. But we have to get serious about this matter, you know, this matter of what is becoming of our families and our children and our music and all of those things that are ours. We have to lay claim to those things, and we have to keep them as free of contamination as we can. And then, of course, we have to know that in a war, there are always casualties.
That's right.
So we cannot expect to have a victory with no casualties. But I certainly hope that the culture won't be the casualty in this war, that somehow we will find each other. And I'm optimistic as well, because I know that as many schemes as there have been throughout the eons of history to destroy us as a people, it has not been able to be accomplished. And somebody up there likes us.
That's right.
And so I'm pretty certain that, you know, as you say, seasons change. And Ayikwe Arma wrote the book, 2000 Seasons. So, you know, we might be near the change of season that we seek. But I'm just very happy to have had you, Booda.
Thank you.
To
I
come
really
down
appreciate it.
and share with me, and you too, Kepara.
My pleasure.
Lance
My
Williams.
pleasure.
Yes.
My pleasure.
Yes, and if there's anything further you want to say, I think you have about 1 minute to say it in, and then we have to give up our time.
I want everyone to understand that my goal is to strive to change the philosophy of our young